Elizabeth Taylor's life was a dazzling carousel of beauty, fame, marriages, and scandal. Her violet eyes enchanted audiences around the world, and her name became synonymous with Hollywood glamour. Yet beyond the headlines about her 8 marriages, her jewels, and her turbulent love affairs, Elizabeth's proudest legacy was far simpler and infinitely more personal. Her 4 children, Michael Wilding Jr., Christopher Wilding, Liza Todd, and Maria Burton, were the quiet constants in her chaotic life, the anchors who gave meaning to the whirlwind of stardom. When Taylor passed away in 2011 at the age of 79, the world mourned the last great star of Hollywood's golden age. But for her children, the loss was far deeper, an intimate wound that left them carrying not only her memory, but also the responsibility of shaping her legacy. Elizabeth had often described her children as her best friends, and in many ways, her life revolved around them even when the tabloids insisted it revolved around her men. Unlike so many stars of her magnitude, she worked tirelessly to give them as normal a life as possible. They were shielded from paparazzi when they could be, whisked away to Switzerland for boarding schools, or taken along to movie sets where their mother transformed into Cleopatra or Maggie the cat before the cameras. They were raised in privilege, yes, but also in a household where Elizabeth's deep sense of loyalty, her fierce love, and her passion for causes like AIDS awareness shaped them in ways that fame never could. Michael Wilding Jr., her eldest, was born in 1953 during her marriage to the British actor Michael Wilding. He grew up with the daunting responsibility of being the son of Elizabeth Taylor at the height of her fame, yet Michael carved out a quieter life. Splitting his time between acting, he appeared in shows like Guiding Light in Dallas, and later sculpting, a passion that eventually became his true vocation. He settled in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where the wide desert skies and silence provided a stark contrast to the glitzy chaos of his mother's Hollywood. His art is meditative, focused on stone and movement, and in it you can see echoes of the man raised in the shadow of a legend but determined to find his own voice. Michael became a father long before his mother became a grandmother in spirit. His daughters Layla and Naomi were born in the 1970s, and his son Tarquin arrived in 1989 with his second wife, Brooke Palance. All 3 of his children were deeply close to Elizabeth, spending summers and holidays at her side. They remember her not just as a star, but as a grandmother who spoiled them with warmth and values rather than jewels. Naomi once reflected, she felt she was responsible for raising the younger generations of the family, and in many ways, she did. Today, her grandchildren carry forward her philanthropic work through the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation.
Each day in this world, 5,000 people become infected with HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. Don't become one of them.
A mission that Michael and his children consider as much a family responsibility as a legacy. Christopher Wilding, born in 1955, grew up alongside his brother Michael in the midst of Elizabeth's Hollywood golden years. He was quieter, more reserved, and, like Michael, tried to stay clear of the flashing bulbs that followed their mother everywhere. Christopher's path took him behind the camera rather than in front of it, where he worked as a sound technician on films like Tombstone and Overboard. His life, too, included high-profile connections. He married Aileen Getty, the granddaughter of oil tycoon J. Paul Getty, and together they had 2 sons, Caleb and Andrew. Later, with his second wife, Margaret Carlton, he welcomed another son, Lowell. Christopher often reflected on the protective cocoon his mother built for them despite her fame. "My mother protected us from the circus," he once said, acknowledging that even when paparazzi swarmed, Elizabeth did her best to ensure her children's lives were not defined by her celebrity. In later years, Christopher retired to Calabasas, California, with his wife, choosing the peace of private life over the glitter of Hollywood. Yet even in his quiet retreat, he has spoken proudly of Elizabeth's activism. If she were alive today, she'd be most pleased with her philanthropic work, he said, recognizing that her greatest pride had shifted from films to the causes she fought for. Elizabeth's only biological daughter, Liza Todd, was born in 1957 during her marriage to producer Mike Todd, the man Elizabeth often described as her one true love. Their marriage was cut tragically short when Mike Todd was killed in a plane crash just months after Liza's birth. For Elizabeth, the loss was devastating, and for Liza, it meant growing up without the father her mother adored so deeply. Richard Burton later adopted Liza, and though she spent her childhood between boarding schools in Switzerland and her mother's film sets, she eventually chose a life far removed from Hollywood. Liza followed her own creative path as a sculptor. Her work, often centered on horses, reflects a blend of elegance and strength, qualities that also defined her mother. Liza married artist Hap Tavey in 1984, and they had two sons, Quinn and Reese, before divorcing. Today she resides in upstate New York, where she continues to sculpt, leading a life marked by quiet artistry rather than public spectacle. Yet her connection to Elizabeth's legacy is strong. Her son Quinn has taken a prominent role in the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, becoming a trustee and ensuring that the fight against HIV/AIDS remains at the heart of the Taylor family's mission. In his own words, the fight against HIV/AIDS was such a vital part of her legacy. I know Grandma would be proud of this work. The youngest of Elizabeth's children, Maria Burton, had perhaps the most unusual story. Born in 1961 and adopted by Elizabeth before her marriage to Richard Burton, Maria was welcomed fully into the Burton-Taylor family. Richard adopted her as well, and she became Maria Burton. Unlike her siblings, Maria largely stayed out of the public eye. She dabbled briefly in modeling and entertainment, but chose to live quietly. She married Richard Carson and had a daughter, Eliza, in 1982, later divorcing and remarrying Thomas McKeown, with whom she had a son, Richard, in 2001. That marriage, too, ended in divorce. Maria's life was touched less by fame and more by the pull of family ties and personal challenges. Her daughter Eliza Carson has followed her grandmother's example by becoming an ambassador for the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, proving that even in the quieter branches of the Taylor family tree, Elizabeth's influence runs deep. Maria herself has lived with dignity outside the public spotlight, a deliberate choice that set her apart from the showy spectacle of her mother's life. When Elizabeth Taylor died in 2011, the question many asked was what would become of her empire. Beyond the jewels, the films, and the legendary love stories, her true empire was her family. Her children, though private and scattered across different corners of the world, have remained remarkably united in preserving her memory. They are not headline seekers, instead, they are the caretakers of her legacy. From Michael's sculptures in Santa Fe to Liza's equine art in New York, from Christopher's quiet life in Calabasas to Maria's private devotion to her children, each of them has chosen lives that honor their mother not by mimicking her fame, but by carrying forward her values. The Taylor grandchildren, too, have stepped forward. Many of them serve in official roles at the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, lending their voices to advocacy, fundraising, and education. They have embraced their grandmother's fight as their own, proving that Elizabeth's fierce commitment to battling HIV/AIDS, a cause she championed long before it was fashionable in Hollywood, remains alive through her family. For a woman often dismissed as a tabloid darling, her true lasting impact is not just the films that made her a star, but the generations who carry her torch in service of others. Elizabeth once confessed to Barbara Walters, "I know I've had an extraordinary life. It's not like an ordinary life at all." That statement could apply equally to her children, who grew up as the offspring of one of the most famous women on earth. Yet what makes their story extraordinary is not their proximity to fame, but the way they have carved out paths of substance, art, and compassion. They have chosen lives away from the glare of Hollywood, bound instead by the lessons their mother left them: loyalty to family, the courage to be true to oneself, and the obligation to use privilege in service of something larger. In the end, what really happened to Elizabeth Taylor's 4 children after she died is not scandalous or sensational. It is far more profound. They grew into the stewards of her legacy, the protectors of her memory, and the keepers of her values. They live quieter lives than the soap opera their mother described, but through them, Elizabeth Taylor continues to breathe. Through the sculptures her children create, through the grandchildren who fight stigma and injustice, and through the enduring love that binds them all together.